I'm Dave Rubin, and this is the Rubin Report. And joining me today is a tech legend, co-founder of Craft Ventures and co-host of the All In podcast, David Sachs. My friend, how are you?
Good to see you.
What do you think about tech legend? There were a couple of ways I was going to write that, and you kind of are a tech legend at this point. You say your name, and people are like, "Yeah, he's a tech legend."
I see nothing wrong with that. You can legend's good, icon's good. You know, any of that. Synonyms for that's all good.
Can we call you a Republican legend now? Because you did speak at the Republican National Convention.
I guess so.
You don't strike me as a conventional Republican.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess at this point I'm pretty much identified with the Republican side.
So before we dive in, and we're going to cover a lot of the craziness of the last week today, I mean, what was that like? You held the fundraiser for Trump at your place a couple weeks ago, before, obviously, the assassination attempt. And then next thing you know, you're speaking at the convention. I thought the convention was absolutely wonderful. It was the big tent that I've been looking for out of the right, out of the conservatives for a long time. Obviously, post-assassination, there was a certain energy to it. How do you feel about your speech and just more broadly what you saw there?
Yeah, I think that's right. It was extremely well organized. And I've noticed that all of Trump's events are very well organized, including the fundraising dinner that we did at my house. That was back on June 6th. D-Day, coincidentally.
Yeah. Seems like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, I think that was basically the nadir for Trump. He had just come off spending 6 weeks locked in that courtroom. Mm-hmm. Clearly didn't want to have to be there in that sham trial. They wrapped this convicted felon, wrap around his neck. And it was at that moment that he really came out and did this swing out to the West Coast. He stopped in Arizona, and then he came to San Francisco, and then he went to L.A. and Orange County. Then I think he went back to Vegas or something on the way home. In any event, he wasn't expecting so many people to be out on the streets to welcome his motorcade when he got to San Francisco. And there were hundreds of people who were Trump supporters who were out demonstrating and waving signs and happy to see him. And I think that was the beginning of like a momentum shift where, he said, "Am I in the right city?" And there were hardly any Trump protesters. And so I think he started getting a bounce. We had a very successful fundraiser, and then it kind of continued through the shooting and then the RNC. And then, of course, you have the Biden debate collapse. So it really was, several weeks that were just kind of unprecedented. And of course, nothing ever lasts, in politics that long. Nothing can be that good for that long.
And nothing stays that long, period, because
right.
look at what the last 2 weeks have gone from, right? We barely talk
right.
about the assassination anymore. Now Biden's apparently out. They've coronated Kamala and a whole bunch more. So, of course, that's what we're covering today. Biden dropping out, Kamala's in, Trump and JD, their path to win. So we're going hardcore politics today. And let's start with the big news of the week, which, of course, was that Joe Biden stepped down. I'm not going to read you guys the whole letter. But, David, I want your thoughts on some of the kind of specifics around the letter. The fact that they posted this days ago on Sunday with no White House letterhead, with what appeared to be a digital signature that was a little bit different than his normal signature, that there was really no reasoning for the stepping away. Do you think they did all, now having seen Biden, and we'll get to some of the video from yesterday or from 2 days ago in just a moment, do you think they did that intentionally to get all of the internet people going down conspiracy lane as to his health and everything? Like, were we all kind of getting played there?
It's hard to say what they were doing. I mean, it was very strange the way they announced it. This was one of the most consequential decisions of Biden's entire career and his presidency. And they just drop it on X in the form of a photo of a letter that, like you said, wasn't an official White House document. It wasn't posted on their website. It was almost like the White House intern could have just done this.
Right.
And how would we know? And then we didn't see the president for 3 or 4 until Wednesday. Mm-hmm. And so he just kind of disappeared. It was very strange. It is part of a pattern, I think, of a chaotic White House. My guess is that it wasn't some sort of trap for online conspiracy theorists. My guess is it was just chaos over there. And they probably needed a few days to, like they said, to write this this exit speech.
So
Remember that the day before Biden supposedly signed that letter, he was saying that I'm in it. I'm in this race. I'm not leaving. I'm campaigning next week. And he called it a revolt. There was reporting that he was deeply frustrated with the revolt. You had campaign surrogates on the Sunday morning shows that morning saying that he was still in the race. And the White House staff and the campaign staff was completely caught by surprise by this. The whole thing was very strange.
yeah, I want to get to the coup portion of this because I don't have a problem calling it a coup. I think you don't have a problem, and we've got one of your tweets that kind of lays some of that out. But first, let's show a little bit of the actual video when they finally got him back to the White House and they put the teleprompter in front of him and they bronzed him, more bronze than the Orange Man himself. Take a look.
When you elected me to this office, I promised to always level with you, to tell you the truth. I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation. There is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. But there's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, yes, younger voices. And that time and place is now.
I mean, my God, David, the lack of energy, the lack of focus to the message. He didn't explain why he stepped away, as you just laid out. The day before, that morning, actually, he had surrogates on all of the Sunday shows saying he was running. There was no explanation as to how any of this happened. And yet here we are.
Yeah, did he change his mind? Like you said, what happened? I mean, in that Stephanopoulos interview, he said, only God Almighty can get me out of this race. He said, repeatedly, I'm not going to be pushed. No one's pushing me out of this race. I'm in it. And was very adamant about this. And then all of a sudden, he changes his mind without giving a speech on that day or any kind of message, just tweeting this photocopy of a letter. And then now, several days later, you have this speech where he doesn't really explain what changed. I mean, why didn't he do this a year ago? I mean, if the goal was to hand things off to a next generation, wouldn't the time to do this been before the Democrat primary? This was clearly rushed. It was sudden. He didn't want to do it. Somehow he was strong-armed. And of course, you had that reporting that Nancy Pelosi said that we can do things the easy way or the hard way.
Right, literally.
And so I guess she's God Almighty in the Democrat Party. Clearly, they twisted his arm and got him out of there. Basically, they forced him to abdicate. And yeah, so that's a coup in my book.
Okay, so I want to read a tweet that you put up because I completely agree with this. I was talking about it all week, and I think it needs to be explored more what just happened here. I accept that he will step away. You wrote, Democrat operatives are boasting about how quickly and efficiently they rigged the nomination for Kamala Harris, just like they rigged the primary for Biden last year. An open convention or speed run primary was always a pipe dream. I'm not even going to bother talking about the guy you retweeted over there who's a complete lunatic. But the point, he's literally, that guy just 2 weeks ago was still pushing the Very Fine People hoax with an edited clip. So we can leave him at that. But I completely agree. Look, I'm not a Democrat anymore. I don't want Democrats in office anymore. But I'm offended for the Democrat voters. They rigged their own primary. They, in essence, kicked RFK out of the party. And then they secretly anointed a woman that was polling at 3% in her own party 4 years ago. And now it looks like she's going to be queen. Like, even if you're not going to vote for her, obviously, aren't you kind of offended for the average Democrat out there?
They should be, because, again, like you said, they had no choice in this. Kamala Harris never got one primary vote. They could have had an organized primary. I mean, Joe Biden did hint a few years ago that he might be a one-term president. He said he might be a transitional figure who would pass the torch to the next generation. The right time for him to do that would have been to get ahead of this a year ago. But the White House staff and the campaign made the decision that they could drag him across the finish line. They were going to try and weekend at Bernie's this campaign. And so they did rig the primary for him. I mean, Matt Taibbi had really good reporting on this. Florida canceled a primary for him. North Carolina, Massachusetts, Tennessee, and Wisconsin submitted only his name to the ballots. And New Hampshire chose delegates through a nominating event that didn't include voters. And then, of course, they refused to debate Robert F. Kennedy, Dean Phillips, or Marianne Williamson. So they did everything they could to rig the primary for Biden. Look, I think he would have likely won it anyway, but the point was to hide his condition from the American people. And they thought they could basically, drag him across the finish line, and then they'd figure out what to do about his condition then.
What do you think this tells us about the average American, or the way the mainstream media, as much influence as it's lost, how it still can confuse people? I mean, we found a whole bunch of them. I have tweets from over 4 years ago saying that he was either not going to finish the term or certainly wouldn't have a second term, and that something was cognitively not right. I'm not a wizard. I'm not from the future. I'm just not a hack. But the fact is, clearly the mainstream media still can confuse people about what is plainly right in front of their eyes.
Well, they were conducting a huge cover-up up until the moment that the debate began. I mean, they were repeating the whole sharp as a tack hoax. And I mean, these literally the same commentators who, by the end of the debate, were questioning whether he should step down, had been talking about his mental acuity. And of course, they invented this whole idea of cheap fakes, which is actually not fake video. It's actually accurate video.
Right. It's real video.
But they claimed it was like clipped out of context or something. I mean, so they were engaged in a deliberate campaign, I guess hoax, in order to cover up the fact that Biden was cognitively impaired and declining. And again, they had every expectation of doing this through Election Day. And the kink in their plans was the debate, when 50 million viewers could see that this guy just wasn't in any condition to do this, that they'd been lied to. And so the one time the media can't lie is when the truth is easy to independently verify, right? And because now their credibility is at stake. So in order to salvage and rescue their credibility, they had to acknowledge the truth and then also act shocked that we've just discovered that Joe Biden is senile. I mean, no, of course they knew.
Right. I always say the truth is a time release pill, but that one, the debate night, was so damn obvious that the time release just matched up with reality, and that's not what they're good at. You're in a lot of meetings, big people, you're now going to conventions and talking to presidents and all that stuff. What do you think was going on in these meetings? So Nancy shows up. We know Chuck Schumer had a secret meeting, even though, of course, they leaked it, so it wasn't secret. We know that Obama then leaked some stuff to the New York Times. What do you think was happening in the room with Biden? Like, what were they negotiating with him? He obviously got something out of this, either money for a library or promises that his son won't go to jail or something. Do you have any sense of what those conversations was like? Like, what pressure can you bring to the sitting president, whether he has dementia or not?
It's a good question. I don't know exactly. And this is why I guess I was a little bit skeptical that they'd be able to push him out, is because he had amassed all of the necessary primary votes, even though that primary process wasn't as on the level as it should have been. Nonetheless, they had gone through that process. He was the legal nominee, had all the necessary votes, and all the delegates wrapped up. And there was no mechanism to replace a candidate who has all the necessary delegates. And it's never happened before in American history. When LBJ, for example, stepped down, it was right after the New Hampshire primary, and there was still time for the primaries to choose a different candidate. In this case, the primaries were over. But as it turns out, none of that mattered. I mean, the idea that Democrats would pick their nominee through democracy was exposed as a total sham. I mean, the insiders were able to completely dominate and prevail over this process. And you could see it happening. I mean, first you had the New York Times, their entire editorial page and all their columnists, one headline after another about, our friend Joe Biden, the wonderful Joe Biden, is now senile, he's got to go. It's like they really stuck the knife in right away. And you really saw what a media-run state our country is. Because as soon as the New York Times did that, it was the beginning of the end for him. And Biden kept saying, of course, no, I'm in it to win it. No one's pushing me out. And then people like Pelosi and Schumer were saying, we're waiting for the president to make a decision. But Biden kept saying, I've made my decision. And they kept saying, well, no, you haven't made the right decision. Look, the intimation was either jump or you're going to get pushed. And after 3 weeks of this, Pelosi said, we're now going to do things the hard way. I don't know what that means. I would love to.
That's the $1 million question.
I would love to know what the hard way means. But there was a hard way that was coming, and it could be exposing his family's corruption, his corrupt business deals in Ukraine. What was Hunter Biden doing on the board of that energy company when he was waking and baking with a crack pipe? I mean, it's just, we could go on and on. I mean, so I don't know exactly what it is. I mean, the presidential library, all the money that's attached to that. I mean, clearly the donors had told him he had to go as well. But I don't know how exactly they strong-armed him, but clearly they did.
Yeah, it's just a crazy notion that the most powerful man in the world, at least purported to be the most powerful man in the world, there's actually powers that and levers that can be applied against him. I want to jump over to
He's a puppet. He's revealed as a puppet.
Well, let's start talking about the next puppet, because there's a puppet on the way. So we'll jump over to televised mental institution known as MSNBC, and Jen Psaki, who of course purports to be a journalist but is actually an activist. She was very pleased with one portion of Joe Biden's speech because it gives a little room for Kamala to do something. Take a look.
The other thing that struck me, and I circled it when he talked about reforming the Supreme Court, because as Lawrence knows, as you all know, this is not a phrase that would have come out of the mouth of President Joe Biden, even while he's been President Joe Biden. And it was a reminder, I think, that leadership is about being consistent and people knowing what to expect from you. It's also being open to evolving.
My God. I mean, they're saying the quiet part out loud that Joe Biden himself, if his brain was still in his head, would never be for expanding the Supreme Court, but he's handing the reins away, and now that she's basically saying that's exactly what Kamala is going to do. I take it that doesn't surprise you very much.
No, I mean, people like Elizabeth Warren have been openly tweeting that they want to pack the Supreme Court. They're saying that's a good idea. It's transparent. I mean, even FDR, at the height of his power, didn't get away with doing that. But Democrats, and he was greatly embarrassed by that as one of his few failures. But Democrats are just openly advocating for this. I mean, packing the Supreme Court, first of all, it would destroy the Supreme Court. I guess we have 9 justices. If they increase the number up to, say, 13, then when the Republicans get control, won't they want to boost it to 20 and so on? You'll just ruin the court. It's one of the last functioning institutions in our democracy, and they want to undermine it and destroy it. It is shocking that they can just say this. They don't seem to pay any kind of price for it at all.
No, and it's sort of the same thing as we just discussed. They seed something in the media, and then next thing you know, it comes true, a couple weeks or a couple months later. So I want to jump to the other interesting portion of this because this is all about the internals of the Democrat Party. It has nothing to do with the grassroots, as Chuck Schumer claimed this week. But now it appears there's a fight. Can you believe that he said that? Like, truly, the gall of this guy. It was a grassroots effort to give it to Kamala. Literally the reverse of grassroots. Whatever the reverse of grassroots is, that's what it was.
The reverse of grassroots is Jeffrey Katzenberg. I mean, that's the
right.
reverse is Katzenberg and all the Hollywood donors and George Clooney. They said that we can't fundraise for Biden anymore. We've been exposed again. We told all of our donors that he was good, and so they were humiliated as liars or fools. But in any event, I mean that's the real grassroots of the Democrat Party is the donor base.
The fact that an actor from 2 seasons of Facts of Life in 1980 is more powerful than the President of the United States. Did you know that George Clooney was in Facts of Life? Are you getting the reference?
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Okay.
That's right.
Just those last 2 seasons.
Your pop culture references are very strong.
The other part of this that is somewhat interesting right now, although I think I'm getting some breaking news on this at the moment, is that Obama has not immediately endorsed Harris. So both Clintons came out and did immediately. We've got something from Unusual Wales here. Former President Barack Obama hasn't endorsed Kamala Harris's presidential bid because he doesn't think she can beat Donald Trump, according to a source close to the Biden family. And then there's a political commentator that goes by Summer Snows on Twitter, and I just thought this was an interesting note, and it's from the New York Post. According to the source, Obama's hope was to get Biden out of the way, and an article written by George Clooney in the New York Times asking him to step aside was part of that plan. However, the higher-ups in the Democratic Party didn't count on Biden endorsing Harris right away, and Obama was shocked when Joe endorsed her, according to the insider. After Biden's ouster, Obama, who did not return a request for comment Wednesday, wanted Arizona Senator and former astronaut Mark Kelly at the top of the ticket when the DNC convention is held next month, the source said. Obama is furious things haven't gone his way, which is why he is not joining the Democratic Party's support of Harris, a Biden source told me. And just as a quick note on this, my guys are telling me that apparently there's a report coming out right now that Obama is preparing to endorse Harris from Fox News. So I don't know if that's true just yet. But David, is that the one last chance that we have that maybe they'll burn each other down? That kind of the Clintons went with Harris, Obama wanted to go a different way, and maybe that infighting will at least cause enough of a problem that, on top of the fact that the progressives hate the liberals and the liberals hate the progressives and everything else, that it just won't work out well, this coronation?
Well, I think you only get one mulligan. You know, how many do-overs do you get? You know, I just don't see how they. I hope you're right. I just don't see how they can go to the Democratic convention and then unveil a new candidate, a third candidate. I think that they're kind of stuck with Harris now. I just think it would be too ridiculous. It would just be insane clown party if the Democrats, chose a third candidate. So I think they're stuck with Harris. My interpretation of Obama's delay and reticence in endorsing is that he likes to remain above the fray. He doesn't want to be, doing the dirty, grubby business of politics that Nancy Pelosi is willing to do. She's the executioner. She was in there and she pushed the button on Joe Biden. But Obama was clearly behind the scenes supporting that. But he wants to remain kind of a transformational figure, and he doesn't want to be dirty up by these machinations and these conspiracies and plots. He wants to remain above that.
Yeah, so he's Palpatine, right? You got that reference? So basically he's Palpatine. Okay, so I'm going to show you.
He's Palpatine before the face gets all disfigured and
right when his teeth were still nice before the whole thing.
Before the mask came off and everyone knew he was a Sith Lord. Yeah,
exactly. So all right, so on Wednesday, Kamala gave her first stump speech, I suppose you can call it. We're going to show you a portion of that, coupled with something else that I thought was quite curious to do on your first day as a candidate.
On the other hand, we are running a people-powered campaign. And we just had some breaking news. We just had the best 24 hours of grassroots fundraising in presidential campaign history. All right? And because we are a people-powered campaign, that is how you know we will be a people-first presidency.
We are all in this together, and your vote is your power. So please make sure your voice is heard this November and register to vote at vote.gov.
Can I get an amen?
Amen! Now on with the show.
And remember, you better vote.
Having that woman have the "you better vote" upside down is sort of the perfect metaphor for this entire thing. Let's start with the RuPaul's Drag Race. David, have you ever done drag? And if so, does it affect your voting?
Well, it's interesting how she's stressing the people power, and it reminds me of a Chris Buckley line that it's always the most totalitarian states that always include people in their name. I think North Korea is China is known as the People's Republic of China. North Korea is known as the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, DPRK. It's sham branding, basically. The people had nothing to do with this, as we talked about. Kamala Harris never got one primary vote. There's the people she's referring to are the elite donors.
Yeah, can you talk about that a little bit? Because again, you fundraised for Donald Trump, and by the way, you've held events for politicians all over the map. I was at your house once for a DeSantis thing. It was the first time I met him when I still lived in Cali way back when. But the fact that they're claiming that she got of course it's $81 million, just like Joe Biden got 81 million votes. But they're claiming basically 81 million bucks in 24 hours. Doesn't that also show a little bit of the coup right there? Because it's not grassroots dollars. It's that they coordinated all of the money people at once, which that's not easy to do, right?
Well, there have been reports that something like $90 million of donations to Biden were being held up because the donors just weren't on board with him anymore. And what I wonder about is whether this 80-something million was basically that, part of that, the large part of that 90 million. In other words, they had all these donations ready to go, but they didn't want to necessarily collect the money and then, have it go to a different candidate. There's all these issues with the, who owns that direct money. So it could be that these donations were being held until we got to, clarity around who the real nominee was going to be.
What do you make of her in general? Like, the idea when we were sold Biden 4 years ago was, oh, he's not a crazy leftist. It's old Joe. He's a Democrat. He'll be okay. He was VP, but he's not Bernie. He's not Elizabeth Warren. She ran in that primary and again was the first one to drop out and somewhere between 0 and 3%. And what do you make of just generally her policies and like what it would be like under Kamala Harris? Well,
so I think you're hitting the nail on the head in terms of her weakness and what the Republicans should attack. I think they should go after her left-wing, view of the world. And we saw this in 2019. Her brilliant campaign strategy was to stake out the territory left of Elizabeth Warren. I mean, she was literally named the most liberal member of the Senate by GovTrack. And this is part of the reason why her 2020 campaign was a disaster. In fact, she dropped out before even making it to 2020. And I think that even in the Democratic Party, she, again, staked out this territory that was so left-wing, to the left of Sanders or Warren, that it didn't really leave her any room. And, of course, then on top of it, you add the fact that she hasn't really been a tremendously likable campaigner. Her rise has mostly been through selection rather than elections. Remember, California is a one-party state, as you well know. And so her advancement through the system has, I think, mainly been due to her intra-party knife-fighting skills, which, by the way, you saw that. She was very effective in consolidating the delegate support and the internal party support. Yeah. She got it within 36 hours of Biden's letter. So I think she's a very effective party fighter, knife fighter, but I don't know that she's ever been proven in terms of being popular with people in an actual contested election.
So to that point, I want to read a tweet that I put up because maybe you can help me with this because it's gotten thousands and thousands of likes, and yet I don't think I have one qualified response on this. Maybe you can help me. A couple days ago, I wrote, I'd love to have a well-known Kamala Harris supporter on the show, someone who publicly supported her during her last primary, thinks she's done a good job as VP and is qualified to be president. I'm sure there's tons of great people out there. It has thousands of responses already, and they're all jokes. I don't know anyone. Can you think of one public person that supported her in the primary, thinks she's done a good job and is qualified now? I'm obviously being somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but I would love to have a true Kamala Harris supporter on, but they can't work at MSNBC, and I don't know where to find them.
Yeah, if you're looking for someone who supported her in the 2020 primary, it's going to be tough because her campaign imploded before even reaching the first state. Look, I think that's right. But the reality is now that she's the official nominee, she's going to have no shortage.
Kalinakis? Is he going to support her?
Sorry, who?
Oh, Kalinakis, J-Cal. Is he going to support her?
Oh, J-Cal, Calcanis.
Calcanis.
Yeah, Nostradamus. It's a good question of whether he's going to support her. I think he knows that she's too left-wing, and I don't think he's going to be fooled about that. But on the other hand, he still has a lingering case of TDS. Apparently, it's a lifelong condition. We try to treat it with red pills, but occasionally it flares up. So I just don't know if he's going to be able to overcome that TDS, even though he knows that she's not really the moderate candidate that I think he would like.
Yada, yada, yada. You've got some work to do on that one. That's going to be the driving notion of your podcast going forward. So I want to read a tweet of yours from a couple years ago because you were pretty prescient on this. You wrote prediction. This is from July 6, 2021. So this is just over 3 years ago. You wrote prediction. The defund and decarcerate agenda is such a disaster across America that by 2024, if not the 2022 midterms, Kamala Harris will be emphasizing her credentials as a tough on crime former prosecutor. Now, obviously, the 2022 midterms, the red wave never happened, but you can already see in the 3 days of her campaigning, the messaging coming out of her, it's much less about Venn diagrams right now, and it's much more, I'm a prosecutor and Donald Trump is a criminal.
Yeah, exactly. Well, okay, I had totally forgotten about that tweet. I remember that and it's coming back to me, that I tweeted that when I was in the campaign to recall Chesa Boudin, who was this, basically a Soros DA in San Francisco, who was, trying to implement this agenda of decarceration, which means releasing as many offenders as possible. And I think this is a really important thing for Republicans to keep in mind, is that when Democrats talk about prosecutors, they mean something very different. And they're interested in the DA races for a very different reason than Republicans are interested. The reason why Republicans like prosecutors and want to run in those races is because they actually want to punish criminals. They want to stop crime. Democrats see those DA races as an opportunity for criminal justice reform, which is they want to backdoor major changes to the legal system using prosecutorial discretion, or I should say abusing that discretion, as Chesa Boudin did. So we should just understand that that's when Democrats talk about prosecutors, what they really mean are Soros DAs. And Harris has a tight relationship with Alexander Soros. There was a picture that I actually tweeted recently about that.
Yep.
The only reason she's not a Soros DA is that Soros didn't start trying to take over these DA races. He didn't figure out that arbitrage until the mid 2010s, and I guess it was just before her time. But I think that if she had started a little bit later, I think she would have been funded by Soros and been a Soros DA.
By the way, for the record, I mean, you were big on getting rid of Chesa Boudin, and it actually did work in that case. San Francisco still got a whole bunch of problems, but at least in that case, it did work. So, of course, the next question goes to who is she going to run with? And what I'm worried about right now is especially I would say post-October 7th or post-Trump trials, assassination type, I've seen so many decent moderate Democrats finally be willing to vote for Trump heading this way. And the question is kind of what can the Democrats now do, either with fear of Trump, so just go TDS style, or bring in some sort of quote unquote moderate to bring them back to the Democrat plantation. One guy who keeps getting mentioned is Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. And I thought we'd take a little bit of this because he kind of sounds right.
I grew up in a comfortable middle-class home. My mom, a school teacher, she was a public school teacher in Philly till she had me and my siblings, and she was an educator later in her life. My dad was just like the local pediatrician, the local baby doc. And they were very focused on helping others. And also, as I said before, Charlamagne, faith played a really central role in our lives. Every Friday night we were around that Sabbath dinner table, something my wife and I continue to do for our kids today, grounding us in our faith, and our faith that teaches us to go out and work for others. And so I didn't grow up thinking I wanted to be in politics. I certainly didn't grow up thinking I was ever going to be governor. But I did grow up thinking I had a responsibility to others. I had work I needed to do for others. My parents instilled that in me in an early age. It wasn't until later in life, actually in college, where I thought I was going to be a doctor like my dad, and I flunked out of pre-med. I was on the basketball team there, got cut from the basketball team. Both things happened in the exact same day, and I thought my life was over, right? And then literally that night, someone knocked on my dorm room door and said, hey, you should run for student government. I'm like, why would I ever want to do that? It was like never on my mind. As I look back on that pivotal day, which sort of set me on this path, I realized the truth is service was always there for me. I just didn't exactly know how I was going to do that service. So that's how it happened for me.
I mean, David, I know you're a Trump guy. I want Trump to win too, but he sounds pretty good. And even some of the things he said there, talking about his faith, that's not what Democrats do anymore. He comes across, he's dressed right. He's not wearing a dress. Like there's something there, right?
He's a rising star in the Democrat Party. And I think he's probably the favorite to be the VP pick, although Mark Kelly, the senator from Arizona, is getting a lot of attention. But Shapiro would be a really smart pick for the Democrats. Like you said, he presents as a moderate. I don't know how moderate he actually is, but he knows how to come across as one. He's smart, well-spoken. I think he would be a much tougher draw for the VP debate for J.D. Vance and some of the other people they're talking about. And, of course, the most important thing is that if he can deliver Pennsylvania, those electoral votes are absolutely essential for Harris.
Yep.
It's hard to see a path for how she gets to 270 without Pennsylvania. So it's a really big prize this time around. So it would make a lot of sense. I mean, I kind of hope the Democrats don't choose him. I hope they go with someone like Mark Kelly, because I think he would be a worse pick. But I could see why they would go with Shapiro.
No, exactly. I'm just trying to give the devil his due here. Like, I think he probably is the right guy to help them win, whether I want it to be or not. I want to just do one other clip with you, because obviously you spoke at the RNC, you're supporting Trump and JD ticket. I want to show you this clip of Trump going after Kamala. This is 2 days ago, and I'm curious if you think this is the right messaging to get her on.
Earlier this year, a 15-year-old girl in Massachusetts was raped by a migrant who Biden and Harris flew into the United States against all orders. In upstate New York 2 months ago, another 15-year-old girl was attacked by an illegal alien that just walked into our country, assaulted with a metal pipe, abducted, driven to an isolated area, raped and killed. And in Texas last month, 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungari was tied up, sexually assaulted, and strangled to death by two illegal aliens who Biden and Harris released into the United States and refused to get them out. What kind of a vice president or what kind of a border czar allows these monsters to come into our country? And this is just a small portion. These people are here now by the hundreds of thousands. And remember this, it's like anything else. They're just getting comfortable. They've just gotten here a little while ago. So you haven't seen the kind of crime that's going to be inflicted on our country. Kamala's deadly destruction of America's borders is completely and totally disqualifying. She shouldn't even be allowed to run for president, what she's done. She's committing crimes.
So, David, a lot of the articles calling her the border czar are suddenly being scrubbed from the internet, but that's what the Democrats have been calling her. You know, there's that crazy video with her and Lester Holt from NBC where he says, "You've been to the border," and or "Have you been to the border?" And she's like, "I've been to the border." "Oh no, I haven't been to the border. I haven't been to Europe." This strikes me as the right tone for Trump when going after her, as opposed to Venn diagrams and making fun of the laugh and all that. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that the border is Trump's probably his best issue, maybe along with inflation. But I think it's his best issue, and he was pummeling Biden with it. And I think those attacks transfer equally well to Harris, because the Biden administration did give her that duty. She was tasked with improving the situation at the border. I mean, admittedly, it was a lousy duty because they had no intention of fixing the problem. So all they did was tar her with it. But because of that, all the lines that Trump had written for Biden transferred directly to her. So yeah, I think it's a very compelling message. And of course, it's the exact reason why the media is going full Orwellian right now, trying to ghost and rewrite their articles and delete previous mentions of her as the border czar, because they just know how damaging that is.
David, let me ask you one other thing. As I think you might know, I take every August completely off the grid, no phone, no TV, no news, nothing. I will know nothing for all of August, no matter what happens, unless literally World War III starts and I'm in the middle of it. I guess I'll figure it out, but I will have no news otherwise. You want to make any predictions as to what I might come back to when I return the day after Labor Day, September 3rd?
Well, that's a good question. We should, what surprises would we see? Well, let's see. When's the debate? It's early September, right?
The debate's early September, but the Democrat convention is the last week of August. So obviously I'm going to miss some stuff around that, and then God only knows what else could happen. But any broad predictions you want to make?
Well, I mean, obviously we're going to have the VP pick by then. I think it's going to be Shapiro or Mark Kelly. If you want me to predict a surprise that's not on anyone's radar, I think that the situation in Ukraine could deteriorate over the summer. I don't know if that means by the end of August, or though it could, but I think that by the election, there's a substantial chance that the administration's Ukraine policy will be revealed to be a disaster in a way that the press can no longer hide, kind of like the way that the Afghan withdrawal was a disaster. So put that on your radar as a potential surprise.
David, I thank you for your time. I will see you in September at some point, assuming World War III doesn't, happen under our watch.
Thanks, pal.
All right, good seeing you. Guys, it's Friday, so no post-game show. And have a great weekend, everyone. And we'll be back on Monday. Ciao.